Hello there, mate.
Hey there.
Yeah, where can I take you?
To Hammersmith, please.
Hammersmith. Okay,
Yeah.
that shouldn't take too long. You have an accent there. Are you not from these parts?
No, I've been here for a while, but I'm from Paris.
From Paris? Oh,
Yeah.
comment ça va?
Yeah, merci.
Yeah? Good, good, good.
Have you ever been there?
I haven't, no. There was an incident in Paris a few weeks ago. How is it now? Do you know? Do you have any family there?
It's a bit tough. It's
a bit tense, huh?
Yeah, there we go. That's the right word. Yeah.
Ah. Yeah, it's a shame what happened. It's very bad. Very sad.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of violence that's going on right now. It's quite bad.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Well, it's very unfortunate that in Paris and in other places around the world where people don't feel safe anymore. It's very, very sad, and it's unnecessary. And it's unfortunate, because it's done in the name of Islam, and Islam is very far from that. It's got nothing to do with that. But
do you know much about Islam?
Well, I'm a Muslim myself.
You are a Muslim.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've had the ability to study a little bit, if you like.
So you probably know a lot more than me.
Yeah, but many people, they misunderstand Islam. They look at the actions of people, and they think that's what Islam is.
Yeah, I know.
So anything to do with Islam is like, shock, horror. This is something dangerous and something that we need to stay away from. When in fact Islam is not like that at all. And people are hijacking, the message or the religion itself to serve their own causes. It's not new. It's not new. It's something that people have done, throughout many centuries in different religions and different ideologies. They use something to try and push on other people.
Push on their own message.
It's very sad.
But I know a little bit about the Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
And a bit of the history, and I don't know if you could answer my questions, but isn't it that he participated in a couple of wars himself?
He did, yeah. Yes, he did.
So how is violence? Well, how is violence looked upon within
well,
the
violence,
religion?
is
if it was part of Muhammad's life, then how does it participate?
Yeah,
and
sure.
How does it participate in modern life as well?
When I was studying the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I looked at it from a number of different perspectives. I looked at it from an Islamic perspective, Muslim writers, Muslim historians, and how they documented his life. And there's also non-Muslims, they have no vested interest into, because they're not Muslims, to praise the Prophet Muhammad. And there's a number of autobiographies written. One of them written by Karen Armstrong, actually, and it's very, very good. It's about the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And it explains from a very kind of neutral position about really his message and what he propagated. And yes, he was involved in some wars, but the wars weren't there, on a kind of expansion, kind of taking over lands purpose. That wasn't the objective. Many of the times it was self-defense, that in fact that the Muslims were attacked in the cities that they were in. Mm-hmm. And whenever they went out to call people to Islam, the option was given there to invite them to Islam, peace, no war. It's only when people refused and people took up arms against Muslims that in fact violence was, that it took place. On top of that, whenever there was, if you like, a war, there are very, very strict regulations, very strict guidelines as to how Muslims are to interact with the opponent. Things like, you're not allowed to harm any women, harm any children, to harm any religious clergy from the opposite religion, if you like, not to cut down any trees, not to harm any of the environment. Very, very strict regulations. And this is something which only in the 1940s, when the UN, the late 1940s, when the UN was established, that laws like this and the Declaration of the Human Rights, that they started to implement laws like that, where Islam had these things prior to this more than 1400 years. Not a lot of people know that.
Another thing I understand about Islam is that essentially it's a message of peace.
That's right.
It's to give yourself
That's right.
for the peace of the world.
That's right.
Am I right?
Yes, Islam wants to bring about peace. It
Yeah.
doesn't want to bring about warfare. And it's you know, the famous false statement that Islam was spread by the sword is it couldn't be any more wrong.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to Malaysia or Indonesia, which Indonesia is the biggest or the largest populated Muslim country in the world, more than 100 million
Yeah, I know
Muslims
that.
there, they embraced Islam because of business transactions from the people of Yemen. There was no sword at all. They just saw the integrity, the good behavior of Muslims, and they used to question them as to why that you never cheat, why do you never deceive, and then they would inform them and say that we're Muslims and we are bound by the word that we give to people. Our word is our bond, and we know that we will be judged ultimately by God in the transactions we do, so we need to be very honest. So the people of those areas were impressed as to how truthful Muslims were in their business transactions, and now of course you find there's millions and millions of Muslims in that area. So the fact that, or the notion that Islam was spread by the sword is completely false. And all you need to do is just barely scratch the surface, just look a little bit, and you will find
the true
that
meaning.
you will find the truth. Yeah, you find, because
Yeah.
it's easy just to throw very simple statements.
Yeah.
And that's all that people remember. When you look at the newspaper or you read a news caption, that's what stays in your mind. But is it true? Only when you start studying these things, you think, what, that's not the case at all.
I see. But so, what do you think the truth of Islam has developed a bit, or how, apart from media or whatever, how like the truth, or what the believed truth of this violence is coming from?
Yeah,
For example, like, well, what is
Mhm.
the modern significance of like a jihad, or
Yeah.
what is their comparison? What are they trying to say? Because I agree with you. Like, I already know that violence is not really part of the religion, or like
That's right.
It's not to like give violence.
That's right. I mean, another false statement that religion brings about war. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring about war.
But that's kind of a weird one, because there's been a lot of wars about
And if you look at
about
all,
religions.
if you look, well,
Christianity too.
that's true. I mean, to some extent. But if you look over the 20th century, for example,
That's
how
yeah.
many wars were actually were based upon religion? World War One, World War Two were not religiously based. Okay, the Vietnam War, okay, the Korean War, all of these wars, the Cold War, it's not religious based. In fact, this is politically motivated.
Yeah.
Politics. It's about countries expanding their lands. It's got nothing to do with religion. So it's a false claim to say that religion is the cause of wars. If you just look at the 20th century, where more people died in this century more than any other century in the history of mankind, none of those wars were based upon religion. Rather, they were based upon political interests, whether it was democracy versus communism or the like. Now, what you mentioned about jihad, Islam is a great civilization. It's not just something that exists in mosques, a few mosques around the world.
It's huge.
It's one of the great civilizations that exists on this earth. So therefore, like any great civilization, it is a nation of people that they have guidelines about how they will live and how they will exist. There were civilizations that existed before, like the Persians or the Romans, or even the Greeks. For them to remain here as a civilization, they had terms and conditions in how they would interact with other nations. There were times, how do you behave with people in times of peace? How do you deal with other nations at times of war? Similarly, Islam, being a great civilization, has terms and conditions how you will deal with other nations at times of peace. That you will have agreements. You will have times when you will have trade and so on and so forth in a peaceful way. And then, of course, there are times when there's war, when a nation is maybe attacking you. How are you going to deal with that? This, if you like, is called a jihad. It's a struggle, because the word jihad means a struggle.
Yeah.
How is it that we're going to defend ourselves? We have a civilization. We have the right to exist. We have our own borders, if you like. We're a nation that exists. We have rights and and hukuk, and regulations that we want to uphold. So with the jihad, it's not just, sometimes these mad mullahs, with swords on horseback running around trying to cut the heads of people. That's far from the truth. It's got nothing to do with that. It's a form of engagement with another people if they're aggressive towards Muslims. And then you have the internal struggle, a jihad, i.e. to overcome your own lowly desires about doing things which are displeasing to God. This is an internal struggle, which is the greatest struggle in some sense, that will always remain with you. Because if you're not involved in a war, then you may, that kind of jihad you may never face. But every single one of us is facing a daily struggle, a daily jihad against evil. So again, it's not a topic which we can just discuss in 2 or 3 minutes and think we know it. It's very important that you have a very nuanced and deep understanding concerning these very important topics which affect so many people.
But so if it's about like a struggle or about defending oneself when your religion is oppressed or
when you're oppressed,
being aggressed, how is it? I don't know. I mean, I know you're not part of violence, but like I don't know how to justify, or how do these people correlate with the religion when so-and-so jihadis that act upon violence, for example, go and bring violence to innocent people.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, then they just become regular criminals,
No, I agree. It's very important that...
But I think a lot of people misunderstand, or people think that there is an actual link between the religion and such acts of violence, where
and that's the mistake. That's the mistake.
Yeah.
And it's easy to make that distinction, or non-distinction, I should say, in that here it is, quote unquote, they're Muslims and they're doing this act in the name of Islam. That surely then this is what Islam must teach. People will make that assumption when in fact what is going on now, with this.
So how do you think is a solution?
A solution, right? I think the solution is in different ways. If you're talking about this ISIS that exists at the moment and dealing with that head on, that's one problem. Also, I think, which we're all part of, is to educate the masses, to educate people about the reality of what Islam teaches and how that this particular movement is very far from Islamic teachings.
Okay.
And you have to make a distinction between what Islam and true Muslims, what they stand for, and what this particular movement, how far away from Islam it is, and what they're calling to, and how they're behaving and interacting with people, how far that is from a true Muslim. Okay. So the fact is, I can have a conversation with you now here.
Yeah.
We can chat about it.
We learned about things.
You start to learn about, and you say, had a conversation with somebody. That's right. I mean, I got to know that, what's going on in these countries. That's got nothing to do with Muslims. That's got nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah, it's just war.
But it's easy for people just to say, if they've got any of these, things in their minds, these thoughts which have already existed there, that this is Islam. They're not willing to ask any questions. They're not willing to engage with the situation. Just simply absorb what the newspapers say, what the news says. Well, if that's what they say, it must be true. Mm-hmm. When in fact, it may not be the case.